Good morning, and I'm honored to give this session today in front of my dear professors, and we shall start our session. The title is Scientific Research Preparation, Principles and Challenges. Okay, why do I start the preparation by this group of photos for those anxious people? To be honest with you, research paper are two words that evoke an anxiety for many academic persons, as it's a tiring job to do, especially when starting, yet it's a teamwork that deserves our efforts altogether. Eminent historical scientists have described research in their own way, where Kurt Lewin said that there is no research without action, and there is no action to be taken without research, while Albert Szent-Györgyi described research as seeing what everybody else has seen, yet thinking what nobody else has thought. Now, there are some queries that hopefully would be answered by the end of the session. First and foremost, why do we conduct research from the very beginning? Secondly, how to prepare your research and the challenges of international publications. To start with the first important question, why do we conduct research from the very beginning? Actually, we conduct research to discover new knowledge, and then we shall share this knowledge among each other, so we can understand concepts and relations among them. Hence, we shall solve problems and improve the current practices into better ones. Furthermore, international recognition is among the eminent aims of conducting research. And we've got a lot of holy grails of conducting research, but I think that it's enough to say that without research, we wouldn't have been blessed by either antibiotics discovery or COVID-19 vaccination. And I think that's enough to say that. Okay, now I hope we can reach a common ground about the importance of conducting research, and then how to conduct our research in a sound way. First of all, you shall have some empirical inquiries that you're asking about. Then you shall collect and analyze the relevant data to answer those inquiries, discuss your findings, and then conclude some recommendations. Seems easy, huh? Okay, now, what is a good quality research? To describe a research as having a good quality, some prerequisites have to be found there. First and foremost, it should be based on a logical rationale that can be implemented in the current practice. Then it should be based on previous scholarly work where you shall complete from where others stopped. It should be doable and reproducible. Everybody else can do it once again after you the same way you did it. Furthermore, it should generate further questions and pose some recommendations for others to complete from where you stopped. And how holy it would be if it's for the welfare of the society and for increasing their awareness. And of course, the ethical considerations should be abided by, especially when conducting the interventional studies. Now, before you start your research, first of all, you have to renew your literature search. Sometimes you feel that you have a new idea, and as a matter of fact, when you search deeply, you find that it's not a new idea. You have to know where others stopped, because this is the point where you shall start. Secondly, you should identify your audience, and this is very important. Who are your target audience? Who are the people you are talking to when conducting this research? And let's be honest together and say that your first target should be the gatekeepers, who should open the gateway for your research to see the light. And I think you know them. They are the editors of the journals, okay? I love them so much. Okay, now we shall get started with our research. First and foremost, you have to define your research question that you shall answer by the end of conducting your research. It has got some prerequisites, and first of all, it should be an interesting research question that should add to pre-existing knowledge, or at least validate it. And how nice it would be if it would change the current practice into a better one. Next, you have to make sure, once again, after defining your research question, that you have explored the literature to know where it ended, where you shall start, as we have said. Thirdly, you should design your experimental methodology quite well. That should be a sound and accurate one to reach proper conclusions. Notice here, I've said nothing yet about drafting the manuscript. It's not the time for this yet. You define the research question, explore the literature, and then propose your experimental methodology. Number 4, here comes the data gathering. And I should stress on the point that good documentation is one of the most important prerequisites for the success of research in any institution. And here comes the role of sound statistical analysis that you should perform correctly to reach for proper conclusions to be derived from this research that should improve the current practice, just like we have mentioned. Number 7, and not before that, you shall start your drafting. So you have got 6 points along the way before drafting. If you define a good research question, explore the literature, design the methodology, gather your data, then a good statistical analysis and conclusions, so you are confident enough that it's time to start your drafting. You know, when I started preparing for this session, as usual, I draft some rubrics or outlines and then add some data below them. When I was preparing for the rubric of drafting the manuscript, this idiom popped up in my mind. When do we say this idiom? We say it when something dramatic is about to happen, and when it starts, a cascade of events ensue that can never be stopped. And this is what happens when you start drafting the manuscript. When you start drafting, you have to keep in mind that the genies will be out of their bottles and they are ready to give a decision about your manuscript. You have to address their concerns quite well because they are going to take a decision about the manuscript. And I think that you know which choice they prefer. So you have to be well prepared for the decisions. Now, drafting your research paper is a very important step. Although the structure of a research paper is almost standardized, yet there are variations among the scientific institutions and even among individual professors of the same institution, so that everybody has got his or her own taste in drafting the manuscript. And this miscellaneous way of displaying the manuscripts is very nice on its own. Now, you've got tons of data and ideas inside your mind and in your tables and results. How to organize them in a good way to display your idea nicely. First and foremost, you shall never have any jumbled thoughts inside your paper, no matter how glamorous they are. Everything but the kitchen sink approach, as if you're having a kitchen sink within your paper and you are throwing tons of data and ideas inside. You shall never do that, because if anything in the paper is not evidence-based, the genies are right there waiting to reject the paper. Everything has to be evidence-based. The proper steps of writing your first draft, I'm sorry, it's not going to be to start by an introduction section. We are not going to do this. First of all, we write a well thought out thesis statement. It should be written towards the end of the introduction, yet it's the first thing that you shall start drafting in your paper. What's a well thought out thesis statement? It's a paragraph that you should describe in the main idea or argument of your paper. Try to make it a small paragraph in short. It should have a clear purpose and should validate the outcomes of the study, and it should be your roadmap for drafting the rest of the paper. You should write it in your own words and no quotation from others. And of course, I don't have to tell you that you should write an interesting, well thought out thesis statement. Now, please allow me to humbly share with you one of the thesis statements that I have written. It's for a paper that I was honored to draft for my dear professor, Dr. Fathi Fawzi. It's about one of his nice ideas about the post-operative visual outcomes of pterygium excision, okay? Please read it out with me. In previous studies, the choice of suitable candidates for pterygium excision has always been related to the pterygium size and related parameters. In our clinical practice, we noticed that there is some variability in the post-operative patient's visual satisfaction despite uneventful pterygium removal in all cases. We observed that the preoperative axis of corneal astigmatism is sometimes variable among pterygium candidates. Based on the optical changes of pterygium existence, we speculated that it may be a major prognostic factor. We didn't leave this as a speculation. So we retrospectively set out this study to navigate through the main factors that may affect the post-operative visual outcomes in pterygium surgeries. And here comes the primary and the secondary outcome. So what have we done here? We had a speculation in the introduction. There is no problem in that because we are starting the research. But this speculation is not out of the blue. It's based on an optical principle according to the effect of the pterygium on the axes of the cornea. And that's why we conduct our study. So I assume that this is a nice thesis statement that has described what are we going to do and what are the aims of what we are going to do. Now, the steps of writing. After writing a well-thought-out thesis statement, you should write your rubrics. While preparing for a paper, for a lecture, for a conference, for anything, you shall never sit on your laptop and start writing before you have a thesis statement, what's your aim about what you are going to do, and then rubrics or outlines. This is very important before filling in the spaces below the rubrics. Your rubrics should be organized once. And here is the step where you are going to exclude the lots and tons of data and ideas that are unfit for a specific rubric. No matter how glamorous they are, you can save it for another paper, not for this one. And avoid, as we have mentioned, the kitchen sink approach that you throw tons of data with no aim or evidence. Also, there is something very important. While outlining your rubrics, your sources shall never organize your paper. You can find lots of interesting ideas and data in lots of research papers that are very nice and international publications, but they are unfit for your paper. It's only you, the thesis statement, and the outline. They are the main things that should organize your paper. Now, if you have a well-thought-out thesis statement and you have your organized rubrics, I think you are on the right track. And let's start something big today, and let's start drafting the first section, which is the introduction section. Right here, you are on the right track. The introduction section should be a background about the topic you are going to talk about. But you should abide by just mentioning the pertinent data to the study. You shall never write a long introduction that's unnecessarily long. Some high-ranked journals, especially the quartile 1 journals, require that you write a 3 to 4 paragraph introduction, including the paragraph of the thesis statement and the outcomes. They have no time to read everything in the introduction. They want to read the methodology, the results, and the discussion and conclusions. So you have to keep it a short 3 to 4 paragraph introduction, 5, and that's going to be fine. Of course, towards the end of the introduction, as we have mentioned, you shall have a well-thought-out thesis statement, and then the primary and secondary outcomes ensure after the thesis statement, and of course, they should match the thesis statement that you have written. At the end of the introduction, the reader has to say, I am interested in this study. The reader should be engaged, should know by the end of the introduction, what is this? And why will I complete reading from the very beginning? And what will I change in my current practice and act accordingly, which is, of course, more important. Otherwise, you lost your readers, especially your gatekeepers who should open the way for your paper to see the light and for others to see your paper. Okay. Afterwards, here comes a difficult and challenging section to write, which is the methodology section, by which you describe the know-hows of conducting your research. For novice researchers, it's challenging to write a perfect methodology section because it actually determines the validity and the credibility of your study. So the editors, the reviewers, and afterwards the audience who are going to read your paper are going to say, yes, I believe you, you have done this, or no, I don't believe you are faking your results, through the methodology section. On the contrary to the introduction section, the methodology section should be well detailed, describing everything in detail. Of course, it should be reproducible. Everyone who reads your introduction can repeat your study once again the same way you have done it. So the methodology section should describe how you did it and how everyone else can do it once again the same like you. A comprehensive methodology section should answer all the question words in the minds. You have to identify your study design quite well, if it's a prospective longitudinal study, retrospective one, case series, case report, and so on. You should define your study groups quite clearly and how you have chosen them. Inclusion and exclusion criteria have to be quite clear and precise. The know-hows of conducting your research should be very well detailed, and of course, you shall obtain the ethical committee approvals from the relevant international review boards of your country and mention the study period and place. I know that the ethical committee approvals and the study period and place should be towards the beginning of the methodology, but here I am writing my rubrics in order of their importance. It's very important to identify quite well everything in your methodology section, and of course never to miss the ethical committee approvals and the study period and place. Now, after a well-detailed methodology section, you are ready to write your results section. And here there is something that, in my humble opinion, is very important for your paper to be interesting for the ones who are going to read it. Don't duplicate the data in the tables and graphs. Sometimes you read a paper, you are starting by your introduction, which gives you a very nice background, pertinent data, and then a very nicely structured thesis statement and outcomes. So, me as a reader, I say I am engaged, I'm interested, I want to complete. I go on for the methodology section. I find it very well detailed, and I believe that the authors have done this. And then, when I'm that much engaged, I start reading the results section and I find it overcrowded with numbers and figures. So I get distracted. And for people who are not that much fond of maths, just like me, we get so much distracted. What I mean to say is that within the text of the results, you should only write the most relevant, significant, and/or striking data. Avoid the noisy results with so much figures and numbers inside. Why? Everything is just right there in the tables and the graphs that are attached to the paper. For the ones who are fond of numbers, they can resort to the tables and the figures. Of course, it's very important to check on the numbers to make sure that your study is valid. But don't overcrowd your results section while writing it by lots of numbers and figures. Resorting to an expert statistician for a sound and professional statistical analysis is something very nice. There is no problem in that. If you don't feel that you are potent enough to go on to a statistical package and start analyzing your data by yourself, you can rely on an expert statistician. This is very nice because the know-hows of this issue would be in his hands, and he can guide you to things that you are missing, especially when you've got lots of partial correlations and regressions and so on. Why? Because I like this proverb so much. Statistics is the grammar of science, and that's absolutely correct, in my opinion. It's the way by which everyone who reads your paper will comprehend what you are saying. So you have to make sure that you are mastering this point so much. And now here comes the discussion section. How to draft a powerful discussion section. This is very important. Well, The discussion section should explain your results. It's not where you shall duplicate your results and write them once again. No. You should explain the results, especially elaborating the unusual results, because there is a misbelief among many of us that the discussion section is the place where you merely compare your results to others. And this is not correct. It is a subsidiary aim for the discussion. Why? You can ask yourself a simple question. If I have a novel idea that no one else has made, so shall I erase the discussion section? No. The discussion section, yes, we compare our work to others, but we have to explain our results from the very beginning. It's not only that I'm going to repeat my results, I'm going to mention the results in short, but then propose evidence-based supporting arguments. I have this result. What's my supporting argument that I base upon the results that I made from the study? There should never be any assumptions. They are evidence-based arguments based on my results. And so, if you have evidence-based arguments, you can have implications of the results to change the current practice based upon them. And of course, as we said, we will compare our work to similar work. And there's no problem at all if you have some study limitations. There is no study without limitations, but the limitations do not mean that you have a fallacy or a defect in your study. You have things that you have done and others that you haven't. Others can do it, or you can do it in another time. And from the study limitations, you can pose some future recommendations for others to start where you stopped, just the same way that you started from where others stopped. In the end of the discussion section, you should answer those questions so that others can answer those questions when they read your paper. What do my results mean? Why does this matter from the very beginning? What can this study change? And what can't this study tell and needs further studies? When you write your paragraphs, make sure that you start by a strong paragraph, you move on to a stronger one, then you end by the strongest. So here is the syncytium of the paper. You start by a nice background in the introduction, a well-structured thesis statement and outcomes. So I am engaged. I will read a detailed methodology, and I feel that I can do it the same way you did it, and that I believe you. Then I have a results section that is a bit concised. I'm not overcrowded with numbers. And then I go on to a discussion section with a stronger, and strongest paragraphs. And so here, I feel that I'm reading a good paper. If you are moving on in the right direction, it's going to be easy to have some conclusions from your study. The conclusions should wrap up everything. You should only mention in a short paragraph the significance of the study and the evidence-based results. And your conclusions should open the gateway for future studies to complete where you stopped. Now here comes the abstract. Although the abstract is the first section that appears in any paper in front of us, but it's the last section that you should write in your paper. Don't write your abstract until you are mastering your paper and you have all the keys of it. Why? It's the gateway for either a rejection or an acceptance. When you submit your paper to a journal, the associate editor first reads your abstract that has got a limited number of words, 200 to 250. Based on your abstract, he is going to make a decision, either a quick desk rejection, and he is going to submit his decision to the editor-in-chief, and mostly he is going to follow his decision, or he is engaged by just those 200 or 250 words, and he is going to send your paper to a managing editor for further reviewing. So you have to be quite sure that this is just like a mini paper. Everything you have mentioned in all the sections is right there in a short way. There is a title or a background that is sometimes required by some papers and sometimes not, but you always have to write a purpose, materials and methods, results, and conclusion. So as I told you, it's just like a mini paper. Write it at the end of the draft when you master everything. And as we have said, it has got some word limits. Those people out there don't have time to read the whole paper to make a decision. And sometimes for some arrogant journals, they don't only require an abstract, but also they require what's called a synopsis. Just 30 or 35 words to be submitted to the associate editor, and upon which he takes the decision. So you have to be more and more precise and to make sure that you can deliver your idea shortly. And this is sometimes challenging, as a matter of fact. Now, your abstract should be very attracting to the editors of the journals and should be clear, explaining the most significant results. Of course, never to be noisy here. There is no time and no space for being noisy within 250 words. You shall have an attracting conclusion by the end of the abstract section, and the preliminary decision, as I have told you, of the editors or even the reviewers are sometimes based on the abstract, because when the managing editor sends your paper out for peer reviewing, when they submit to a reviewer or ask a reviewer to review the paper, he receives the abstract by email. And when he reads the abstract and he is interested, he will press the link to review your paper. If your abstract is not interesting for the reviewer, he will reject and he doesn't have time to read your paper. So it's very important to take a good care. Those 200 or 250 words, I may spend 2 to 3 hours writing them to make sure that I did my best, that they come out nicely. And now, don't waste your time in the first draft. Although it's very important to take a good care of your first draft, but there are some issues that make you waste a lot of time in the first draft. First of all, avoid excessive editing in the first draft. Why? Because while revising the paper, you may even remove what you edited from the very beginning. So the editing, the rephrasing, the language checks, avoid overdoing this in the first draft. From the very beginning, I advise you all to use reference manager softwares. And of course, Mendeley and EndNote are very nice ones. Well, lots of us believe that when you use a reference managing software, you will care no more about your references. And you will not check them once again. No. Please, after using the reference manager software in your paper, make sure that you copy-paste every reference that you have cited one by one on PubMed to check them. Because sometimes Mendeley and EndNote leave your references with some fallacies or some typos. So you have to check them one by one. So why am I using them from the very beginning? For ordering of your references. Now you start your first draft and you write your paragraphs in the introduction and especially in the discussion. You may write your paragraphs very nicely, but when you start revising your first draft in the revision phase, in many instances, you can find that this paragraph is not suited right here. I shall move it upwards. What about moving it to the introduction section or towards the end to fulfill the stronger and strongest idea that I have told you about? When you are having more than like 15 to 20 references in your paper, and this is quite common, you will find difficulties in rearranging paragraphs or even removing some paragraphs. Why? Because you are going to find yourself that in every time you remove a paragraph or part of a paragraph from here to there, you have to rearrange the whole references once again. But if you are using a potent reference manager software, you will find that with a click on the paragraphs, you rearrange them, and then they are automatically rearranged once again, wherever you put the paragraph here or there. Otherwise, if you are not using a good reference manager software, in many instances you feel like this paragraph should be right here, but I think it's nice to leave it there, okay? I'm not going to mess up with the whole paper once again, just to change the position of a paragraph and so on. So I advise you to use the reference manager softwares. It's a very easy way to use them. Then you get acquainted with this. With a click, you can reorder your references. Also, plagiarism checker is important. Plagiarism means that you are quoting a lot from others, and you have a high similarity index with a single paper or with many papers. Even self-plagiarism exists. So if you quote or if you cite even from your own papers, you have to rephrase what you have said before in other papers. I'll tell you something. In the year 2016, I was even starting this dumpy road of writing papers, and I just had a couple of papers published. And I submitted a paper to a journal, and 3 to 4 days later, I received a quick desk rejection. Why was the rejection made? The associate editor sent me a long text criticizing the unethical thing that I have made, that I had a very high similarity index with another paper that exceeded 5% with another paper, and this is totally unethical to do so. And when I looked at the paper, he told me that I took a lot from, I found that it was my paper, one of my papers, and it was just like, what are you doing? This is me, it's my paper, are you crazy or something? No, self-plagiarism exists, and you have to rephrase. And from that day on, dating since 2016, I rephrase every sentence I write. So now I don't use the plagiarism checks, and when I try to use them online or something, I find it very small. But if you are not that capable of rephrasing, you have to make a plagiarism check before the editors do it for you. And you have to train yourself to master your language a bit so that you shall rephrase what you are writing. If you rephrase everything from the very beginning, you are not going to face troubles with the plagiarism checkers. Language checks are very important for any misspellings, grammatical and punctuation errors, and writing style. And of course, I give the editors and the reviewers an excuse. We as native speakers of Arabic or Egyptian native speakers, when you have a foreigner who is speaking, as we say, broken language, you feel totally upset. And this seems very much unprofessional, and sometimes a poorly written abstract regarding the language may be the first cause of desk rejections, because he feels that you are talking wrong. What's this? So if you are not mastering your language, and if you are not potent to write your paper correctly, please resort to language checks from the very beginning. You may even use or consult the experts, proofreading author services of the journals. I know they are a bit expensive, but here, I have dealt with such language checks about twice or thrice. Many years ago, I used Walters Author Services. Walters is the publisher of Cornea Journal. I did this author services because I was asked to do it by the journal during the revision. And sometimes it's just by default that the reviewers or the editor asks you for a language check, even if he thinks you are writing in a good way, but it's not that nice. Some people assume that they want the publishers to gain benefit, and you pay and make some professional author services, or they may ask you just to consult a native speaker or something to reread your paper. If you are writing in a nice way, and you feel that your language is fine, you can keep this stage to be asked for in a revision. Because in many instances, they ask for this stage in the revisions. But if you don't master the keys of the English from the very beginning, never submit your paper without language checks. And you know, they are not that much expensive. When I submitted, they give me choices. Do you want your work to be submitted after 1 day, 3 days, or 7 days to be handed to you, for example? That which can be handed after 7 days is going to be much less expensive than the one that you wanted tomorrow. And if journals send you a revision and they want language checks, they usually give you time, about a month or so. So you may resort to them. And you know, when I used the author services twice, it was very beneficial. Because they don't just recheck the language for you in your paper, but they give you tips towards the end. They are very professional in that. They give you a detailed report about the paper, and they, along the track changes, he changes everything for you, and he gives you tips like that. I noticed that you use thesis statement a lot, and this word, I think you should not use it that much. I think that you use pentacam indices. No, this is inanimate, so use indices of the pentacam more, and he gives you tips, because the ones that they refer the paper to are not only native speakers, they are native speaker ophthalmologists. So he knows what you are writing, and he may even give you his opinion about the paper from the scientific aspect. So the one you are paying some money for author services, may be your first reviewer of the paper. He may give you an idea about the paper from the scientific aspect. When you are starting, you may rely on that. Now, when you do these issues, you are not wasting a lot of time in the first draft. So you start to revise it correctly. How to revise your first draft that you have written? Actually, its revision is not only a check for typos or language problems. It's not like that. You have to recheck what, very importantly, you have to check that your thesis statement, that you have spent time to write a well-thought-out thesis statement, was fulfilled towards the end of the paper. This is very important. You have to ask yourself, was my thesis statement fulfilled? And does the paper flow from the beginning till the end? And here comes the role of the reference managing softwares, as I have told you. This is very important, because in many instances you are going to change the position of the paragraphs from here to there, because you have to feel that your paper is a syncytium. Sometimes some of our junior staff members at Ain Shams University send me their papers to take my humble opinion. They are writing very nicely written paragraphs, but the paper is detached. Your paper shall never be detached, no matter how nicely written. Every paragraph should have something to link it to the previous one or the following one, with just a word, with just a chronological sequence and a logical order of the paragraph, so that you feel that you are reading a syncytium. You don't start a paragraph and you feel that it's totally detached from the one above it, because you have to put yourself in the place of the editor, the reviewer, or even the audience. They want to be engaged with a syncytium of your paper. You have to have logical and smooth transitions and avoid unnecessary repetition, especially if you repeat your results in the discussion section without supporting arguments. There is no value of doing this. And please watch out for the genius right there. Avoid any generalization or assumptions that are not evidence-based. This would be a source of rejecting your paper, and they will have the right to do so if you did that. Well, I know that drafting manuscripts and conducting research is sometimes very cumbersome or tedious. But you know, success is waiting for you at the end. Maybe some money, but I'm not sure about that, okay? But you have to be energetic. This is very important. Don't procrastinate. I know many eminent surgeons and ophthalmologists here who sit with each other or with me, and they say, you know, we've got some very nice ideas. And every year when we check on the international publications, I find some papers that are very nice, and these ideas, I had them many years ago. I swear that I had them, but I haven't published them. Okay, but we procrastinate. Next time, next year, tomorrow, I'm going to think about that. Later, never. It's going to be now. We have to start that. We shall document our work and efforts and have international recognitions by publishing our papers. Improve yourself is very important. As a matter of fact, in many instances, we resort our failure and multiple rejections only to the editors and reviewers. There are some ethnic considerations. They don't like to publish to Arabs and so on. But in many instances, the problem lies in us. In many instances, the quality of our papers are not like the quality of others. So you have to improve yourself from the very beginning. If you are not even a big name, you can build your name time by time and try to improve yourself. And don't just resort your failure to others, and that's it. Now, after you have prepared your paper, I think it's time to publish it. Well, I hope I had such a button. After finishing my work and efforts, I press on the button and I publish. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, we don't have this button. And unfortunately, when we encounter those multiple rejections, we get so much frustrated. I'm going to remove this photo, okay? Why can we have lots of rejections of our papers? Maybe because they have a poor quality. And that's why we have to search in ourselves before searching in others. Choosing the proper journal and abiding by its prerequisites is very important. That's why before you submit your paper to any journal, you have to read their aims and scopes quite well, because sometimes you are submitting a nice paper but to a wrong place. You are not within their aims and scopes, and sometimes the journals change their aims and scopes from time to time. So they are not interested now in the refractive surgeries. They are more interested in phaco surgeries and want to release lots of issues on them. So you are submitting to the wrong journal, and that may be the cause of your rejection. Abiding by its prerequisites is very important. You may receive a silly quick desk rejection because you are not abiding by the guidelines, and he doesn't have time to resend to you and tell you that you have not abided. He will send a desk rejection, okay? Another cause of failure of publishing is the proper choice of subjects. You have to choose a hot topic. Everyone is talking about, interesting, and as we said many times, changing the current practice into a better one, and this is very important. Of course, the names of the authors differ. That arrogant author who is adjusting his tie in the mirror and ready to publish is so confident in himself. I am that name and I will publish. When we are not that big names, we get frustrated. But you know, if you start to improve yourself, don't procrastinate and have a lot of perseverance. Who knows, maybe one day, hopefully, you would just adjust your tie like that and publish your paper. It's just a matter of perseverance and patience and, you know, choosing the proper journal. You know, the journals have got rankings. It's not a must that I publish in the Journal of Refractive Surgery, Journal of Cataract and Refractive Surgery, Retina and Ophthalmology, Cornea, and that's it. The ophthalmology journals are not just 5. When you don't have that sparkling idea that enables you to publish in those very high-ranked journals, go on and browse the internet for the other journals. But I advise you to always publish or try publish in the journals that are indexed on the well-known medical databases. Avoid starting by anonymous journals. Why? You won't have international publications, international recognition. This is number one. And number one, too, which is very important, those poor journals have very bad reviewing process. They will send to your paper for a very poor reviewing, so your paper won't be refined. You need a second look on your paper to be better. So please try to recheck the journals that are on the indexing databases. You have Thomson Reuters, of course, Citation, which is of Web of Science, the Journal Citation Reports, and Scopus, which is the CIMAGO citation. There are about 60 journals right here and more than 100 right there. Of course, any paper on Thomson Reuters is a very nice one. If you publish in Thomson Reuters papers, it's very nice. And Thomson Reuters even has got quartiles. We now have 60 journals in the Thomson Reuters. Divide them by 4, so we have 15 in every quartile. quartile 1 journals, the highest, then quartile 2, 3, and 4. When you are starting, start by quartile 3 and 4 journals. Quartile 3 and 4 journals on Thomson Reuters are very nice ones, internationally recognized ones. But if you have a sparkling idea, you may publish in quartile 1 and 2. Many of us and many of my colleagues have many publications in the quartile 3 and 4, some in quartile 2 and very few in quartile 1, and there is nothing wrong about that. You have to climb the ladder from below upwards. Of course, there is subjectivity that exists among the editors and the reviewers, I know, but your paper and your nice idea may prove itself in front of them, and you may have very nice chances from the very beginning. And I have to tell you that the best revenge is to improve yourself. And actually, it's not a revenge from the editors or the reviewers. Never mind about that. It's a revenge from failure. The best revenge is to improve yourself. Attend courses to help yourself to learn. There are many online courses out there, but you have to have some time for this. And Coursera website has got some very nice. I advise you to visit Coursera website. It's available online. Some courses are even free, some for some charges, and it can give you better chances to increase your experiences. Apprenticeship with experts in publications would be very nice. And now we have the social media, and we can communicate with others in remote countries and remote continents quite easily than before. Taking experts' opinions in your researches would be very nice if they have time. Ask them to read it for you and give you their opinions. The opinion of an expert in your paper will not benefit this paper only, will make you benefit in upcoming papers by very novel ideas. And would you please stay tuned to the 2 upcoming sessions that I find that are complementary to my session. First one about biomedical statistics by Dr. Mustafa Mohammed Al-Shahid, lecturer of community at Ain Shams University. And I believe that any researcher should have a nice idea about the biomedical statistics, even if he is not going to use the statistical package by himself or by herself. If you have a nice idea about the study design and the tests you are going to use, it will be very beneficial for you. And then at 1 p.m. we have Professor Dr. Ahmed Rida Awadin, the Assistant Professor of Ophthalmology at Cairo University and one of the eminent managing editors in many international journals, who is going to talk about his editor's perspective in rejecting or accepting the papers he receives. Okay, so would you please stay tuned to this? And that's it. That's all I have for today. And I thank you so much for your time, attendance, and attention. And I'm ready for any questions. Thank you. Thank you.